let's have a lesson on this Andantino by Carcassi. This comes from my Grade 2 Repertoire Lessons book. There's a link for that under the video, but you can learn from the video for free, kind of like how to approach learning pieces. So what we're going to do first for this piece is take a look at some of the key signatures involved and the scales. So we'll play some scales using those key signatures and some of the different textures in the piece, the right-hand patterns, as well as some of the left-hand difficulties in the piece and how you might overcome them. So this piece switches from A minor into A major halfway through. So it's a good review of your key signatures, and as you get more advanced, pieces will not stay in one key necessarily. So let's warm up by playing some different scales in the different keys to familiarize yourself with what notes are used in the piece. So let's start with a harmonic minor scale, which is just a minor scale with a raised 7th degree. When you get to that top of that scale, because of the stretch between the F natural and the G sharp, we're going to use 1, 4, 4, 3, and then we're just going to jump down. Lots of different ways you could finger that, but I've chosen that one just to kind of keep you in position. Shift up, and then you'll have one kind of like weird little spot where you have to shift down to first position. Try to keep your shifts nice and organized though, like move your whole hand. Then shift up, play the G sharp, shift down. And then A melodic minor. A melodic minor raises the 6th and 7th degrees on the way up and then makes them natural on the way down. All these scales are written out with fingerings in the book, of course. Even if you don't have the book, I'm sure you have a scales book somewhere and you can review some of these scales. It's just a good idea when you play a piece in a key, play some of the scales from that key just to familiarize yourself with that key signature. Then the second half of the piece goes into A major, so let's play an A major scale. A major has 3 sharps. Sometimes it's a really good idea to say the note names out loud so you actually gain an awareness of the key signature. You're not just playing random fingerings that you see on a page somewhere, right? If you actually say like A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, then you actually will absorb the key signature much better. So I highly recommend saying those note names out loud. So one of the things in this piece is, in bar 9, for example, we have this texture. And it's written as just 2 voices, like an upper voice that stems up and a lower voice. But there's kind of 3 voices there. Because guitar music crams so many notes onto one staff, we sometimes combine voices. So in the first example that I show, it's the original bar 9 that just looks like 16th notes on the top. The second example, I've written it out in 3 voices, so a sustaining top voice, with the bass note. That way you kind of feel like the melody is just F, C, and then all this stuff is just accompaniment. And it will, why is this important? Well, one thing, you want to bring out a simple melodic line, but you also want to make the accompaniment softer. Why emphasize accompaniment when you could just be emphasizing something simpler? So you just emphasize this going to this, and then like just soften up the other stuff. also will tell you to like sustain those notes. This is how we interpret music. Music on the page doesn't always look the way that it sounds. It can sound very different based on how we interpret it. So I just wrote this little thing out here and talked about it here just to like spark your interest in this, to explore the music further than what's just written on the page. Listen for notes you want to sustain, because what's written is really just like, you know, like the F would disappear rather than sustain through the whole bar. And that's just an interpretive choice that you have to get used to. There's one section in this piece at bar 14 that requires this hand position, and we've talked about this before. This 4-3 here, 4 on the B, 3 on the D. And it's kind of tricky in this piece because you also have a low note as well. I know that some students will have trouble with that fingering, but let me give you a few tips. First thing, if my hand position is off, if it looks like this, I can't reach it. I can't do it. It's impossible to do. If my hand position is like this, I can't reach that chord shape. And students complain about this chord shape all the time. The main tip is to swing this knuckle around, keep your knuckles parallel with the strings so that you can grab those shapes. If my hand's like this, I can't reach it. It's just, I feel so much strain. But if I swing everything around, you can see my fingers naturally hover over those frets. It should be easy. You just like lower your fingers into the string. But students often there's a combination of things. Sometimes their guitar position's off, and sometimes their hand position is off. And then it's just like impossible. I can't even get my fourth finger past the third fret. But if I bring my guitar position back into place and I bring my hand around, you can see my fourth finger can reach the fourth fret, no problem. Even the fifth fret, no problem. Maybe the sixth. So don't just stretch your fingers trying to get these chord shapes. Re-examine your sitting position. Re-examine your hand position. So I've written out that bar just to kind of like give you some dedicated practice before you play the piece. Technically, you can lift off the first finger. I like to practice it with all of the notes down. This is a very important lesson that shape will come up in other pieces, so tackle that right away. Guide fingers. There are tons of guide fingers that we use in guitar all the time. Guide fingers are just when you have a finger on a shape and you keep a finger on that string and slide it up that string to the next shape. So it only works at certain times, right? When your finger gets to stay on that same string. There are guide fingers everywhere. We don't always think about it, but sometimes it's really important. In this particular case, at bar 32 and 33, we have this chord shape that comes up. And so in order to accomplish that chord shape smoothly, I've even refingered the A major chord here to be not 1-2, but to be 3-4. That way I can slide the fourth finger up 2 frets, keeping it on the second string. Keeping it on the second string just kind of takes care of one of the notes in that chord, so you don't have to just jump and get the chord. Now, to be honest, at my level, I can just jump and get the chord. But in my more difficult pieces, I mark the guide fingers and I have to have them in order to be successful and to be able to play the pieces. And I highly recommend that as a student, you also do that to accomplish your pieces, which might be difficult for you. You can try doing it without the guide finger, and if you're fine, you're fine. But part of guitar playing is being efficient, and keeping your finger on that string is definitely efficient, so I think you should aim for it. So that bar 32 and 33, if you want to mute on the rests, it's no problem. Put your thumb on the bass string and release the pressure of the chord in the left hand. And that will create a muted note, right? and then you just get that upper E. So guide fingers are incredibly helpful, and just make sure you actually pay attention to them whenever there's a tricky chord shape, a chord shape that gives you trouble. Maybe you can solve it, make it easier with a guide finger. Not much to say about the piece. We can do a quick walkthrough of it though. The first 8 bars are pretty straightforward. Most of the fingering there is pretty self-explanatory, but I wrote it in just a little bit just to make sure you're alternating right-hand fingers in the top voice. Bar 9, start with M, so you can grab A on the next note. Bar 14, we have to start with A and M because we just used the I finger on the note before, so it would be too quick to jump the I finger over. So A, M, there's that tricky shape that we practiced. And then it's kind of a repeat to the end of that first section. I didn't do the repeats in the video just to save some time. Please do them when you're at home. Second half, so you can see I'm putting my thumb back on the bass string and lifting up the chord notes just to kind of clean up the sound where that rest occurs. Here, you have to just jump into second position, but just try to make an organized jump and make sure your fingers are in line with the strings here, right? So that you can just go. If you're like this, obviously that doesn't look very good. I'm reaching out to the A and stuff like that. So just make sure that when you jump up, just jump up into second position, 1 finger per fret kind of stance above the strings. Actually, don't mute the bass there. And then at bar 31, use 3, 4. So you can guide finger to that chord and jump back. And then the rest is pretty much the same except for the last 2 bars. I used 1, 3, and then just extend 1 to get that final chord. And then DC al fine just means go back to the top of the start of the piece and go all the way until the fine. This piece is not that difficult, but you might find some of the sections a little bit tricky. So I hope that the little lesson pages I gave on this piece will make those sections something that you've practiced lots, so that when you go to play the piece, you'll be able to breeze through it fairly easily.